All right, welcome to Weekly Classes Q1 Week 1. This is your introductory week to 3D Studio Max. We're going to cover basic setup, moving around the interface, primitive creation, and simple rendering. This week we're only going to do one video. In the future we'll have multiple videos. And yeah, we're going to get started right in it. You should probably already have 3D Studio Max open. So let's go ahead and get into that. First things first though, this is the overview of what we're doing today. We're going to overview the series. We're going to talk about 3D Studio. We're going to talk about orthographic versus perspective views. We're going to cover the user interface. We're going to cover the viewport selection interaction, and we're going to create a snowman. So let's go ahead and get started. We'll get this out of the way. You should probably already have 3D Studio open. It probably looks something more along the lines of this. You have 3 different windows. Now, in these 3 different windows, you'll notice that each one of these windows, these viewports, has a different name. You've got the top up here, you've got the front view, the left view, and the perspective. You'll also notice you've got up here in the top left-hand corner, you've got your window where you can see all the different options you have, like opening a new file, saving, importing, exporting, all that other stuff. These buttons also do the same thing. This opens a new scene, opens a file, etc., etc. Along the top, you have your standard ribbon with edit, tools, group view, all these different things. We're not actually going to mess with these a whole lot today. What we're going to start getting into is all the different hotkeys that you're going to use consistently throughout this series. Some of those are going to be ones we use all the time, and some are going to be ones that we actually could use or not, depending on whether we decide to press these buttons up here or actually use the hotkey. So, for instance, on angle snap, I can either press the button or I can press A for angle snap. And we'll talk about all these primary buttons later. Up here, this is called the ribbon. The ribbon is another way to get to a lot of the tools that are over here in the control tab, the control panel. And right now there's nothing selected, so this doesn't really have a whole lot to work with. And this is your main viewport area. Okay, you'll notice, like I said before, you've got a top window, a front window, and a left window. And down here you have a perspective window. Now, these windows, these 3 are called orthographic views, while this is called a perspective view. A perspective view is the way your eyes see things. So, we're going to actually create something real quick. The first things first, go ahead and come up here to this little Create tab. Alright? Now, this is our command panel over here. We're going to do a whole lot of work in this area throughout the series. But first we're going to start off by creating things. Now, in the Create tab, you can click on the Create tab and it brings up a new setup. Now, every one of these tabs has different tools in it. And we will use a lot of them, though not all of them, in this year. Each one of these tabs has lower tabs. Almost all of them have lower tabs, where they have even more tools, and sometimes even these tabs have other options that get us different tools. Extended primitives like a hose is not found under standard primitives. Alright, so to get started, we're going to start with a box. Actually, yeah, let's start with a box. We'll put a box by clicking inside this window, inside the perspective view. If you click and drag, you lift up. Now you can tell that, or you can just see that you can't actually see anything on mine because I have something hidden right now. Let me try it again. I'll highlight, get rid of all that. So let's start with a cone actually. So if I drag out a cone, I click once to create it, and I'll click again, and I can create the point, and then click again to end it. So I've created a cone. If I want to rotate around that cone, I can hold the Alt key and press the middle mouse button. and it rotates around the cone. The best part about this cone system is you can see that from each viewport we have a different view. From the top it looks like a circle. From the front and the left it looks like a triangle. But from the perspective view it actually looks like a cone. Now we can actually maximize these views, whichever one we're in. We can right click on a window and just see how that little gold box shows up around it. Whichever one you have highlighted, I'm going to highlight the perspective view. If you hit Alt W, once again the Alt key is right next to the space bar, and then hold that down, hit W, it will maximize that view. Okay, that doesn't mean the other views are gone. We can still get to them. If we hold Alt and press W again, it goes back to what we call the quad view. Now, once you move further on, you're not going to actually use the quad view a whole lot. You're going to get better and better at just sort of understanding how it works. But for today, we're going to work in the quad view a significant amount. The nice thing about the quad view is it shows you how 3D works. So I'm going to click in here, I'm going to right click in here, and then I want to select. If you see, if I click on this up here, I create another cone. That's not what I want. I want to be able to select and modify and move this cone around. So the way I do that is hit the Q button, or I can come up here and click this button here. It's called select and move. And if you hold over it long enough, you'll see that a little tool tip comes up that says select and move. Click on that, and now you can actually move it around. Now this is called the gizmo, this little arrow looking thing. Now we've got three main tools, so we have three main gizmos. The select and move gizmo allows you to move things back and forth. Okay? One of the things that allows you to move it back and forth, you'll notice that as I move it up and down here in the front view, it doesn't look like it's moving at all. That's because it's actually getting closer to us. If I actually move up and I move this like this, you can see it move. I want to set this back to my front view. Oops, right, that's not what I want. Front. Now you'll notice each one of these windows has its own name: perspective, orthographic, top, bottom, front, back, left, right. So you could do other things. Many of them have hotkeys like T for top, F for front, L for left, etc., etc. We'll use those a lot, especially later. But for today, just understand that when you click on something, it allows you to move it around. Okay? So go ahead and take a second and play around with your cone. And understand how your widget works. When you grab in this box, you can move it on the Y and X axis in the top view. If I grab just along Y, I should only be able to move it up and down on that axis. The way we ensure that this happens is we got to go to right click on Snaps Toggle. It's going to bring up a whole new window set. And in this window set, we need to choose grid points, vertex, and grid lines. You may have any variation of these set, but for now, make sure it's grid points, grid lines, and vertex. Then go to Options, which is the next tab over. Come down here and make sure Enable Axis Constraints is set up. Now, once you do this once, you won't ever have to do it again as long as you stay on the same computer. However, this needs to be done. You have to set this Enable Axis Constraints, otherwise you won't be able to just click on one set of the arrow and have it move. See, I'm still holding my left mouse button down. As you can see, it moves a little bit, but mostly I'm moving left and right, and that thing is not budging. Okay? Now if I grab in this spot in this square here, I can move along both axes at the same time, so I can actually move diagonally. However, you'll notice in my perspective and my left viewport, which are here and here, it's not moving up and down at all. That would be if I open this window. If I grab this, any one of these boxes, it'll allow me to move it in two directions rather than just one. Sometimes this can be great, other times not so great. You'll also notice as we move this back and forth, this number down here changes. So I'm going to move this back and forth, but we're going to look here. See that? It's moving because I haven't let go. That moving is giving us a world position of this cone. If I want to move this cone to 0, 0, 0, which means I want it to be directly on the grid, directly centered, and directly sitting on the grid, all I have to do is come down here and type 0, 0, and you'll see it moves a little bit, and 0 is already set. There's little spinners here, so if you wanted to move it, you could, but we don't want to, so I'm going to hit Control Z to undo it. Alright, so you've made a primitive cone, you've moved it around a bit. Now what if we want it bigger? Now up here are our tools, and each one of these tools has a hotkey. Alright, this tool here is called Select Object, and that's Q. Q allows you to select objects. So I'm going to create another object here. I'm going to create a torus because they're weird. So I'm going to create a donut. Alright, so I created a donut. Now what I want to do is I want to select this object. Okay, well I've already got torus selected, so I could come up here and click this and have it deselected by clicking up here somewhere, or right clicking or hitting escape. But if I want to select something, I've got to have either this select object selected, select and move, select and rotate, or select and uniform scale. So this tool, this tool, this tool, and this tool. Now think of this as your left hand. Your left hand, your pinky, should be sitting on Q. Q allows you to select. If you keep hitting Q, you'll notice this changes over here. This is how you select things. If you initially, it should be set to a square, so if you click and drag, you get a marquee box selection. However, if you tap it again, you get a circle. If you tap it again, you get a system where you can actually connect the dots and create like sections where I just wanted to get that piece. There's also the loop selection, so if I want to make sure I just get that, and the spray paint, which allows me to just spray paint sections, so whichever ones I want. Now if I want to select two things at once, I hold Control and click them. So if I click one object, make sure I have Q selected, and you can also hold down this selection box and decide what type you want. So I'm going to grab this rectangular selection tool, drag a box around this object, and I'm going to hold Control. As I hold Control, if I click on another object, I get both of them. So now if I hit W to select and move, I move them both together. Pretty cool. So that's the basics on how to create objects. Go to the Create tab, creating objects by clicking, dragging, and figuring out. Each one of these objects is kind of intuitive. I can move around the objects holding Alt and middle mouse button. That rotates. The middle mouse button zooms in and out. Then the middle mouse wheel zooms in and out. And by just clicking the middle mouse button and not holding Alt, you can sort of pan back and forth. Alright? It's not actually a pan, it's more of a dolly shot. So we're actually moving. The camera is moving left and right, still facing forward. Alright? Cool. So that's our basic object. So we can also delete objects relatively easily. Now, you'll notice that if I hit E, this button is highlighted. That's my rotate tool. The rotate tool has a widget as well. It looks like this multicolored or three-colored sphere. If I select just one edge, I can get this thing to move perfectly on one edge. You'll also notice that it usually shows the actual angle that it's moving as well. If you press A, it will only snap to 5-degree increments. If you right click at any point when you're moving something, or at any point when you're doing something, it automatically undoes what you were working on. So if I start spinning this, I'm like, oh, I did it too many times. I don't want it that many times. You can always right click, and that sets it back to undo what you just had finished. Alright? Great. So now we're 15 minutes in. we need to talk about orthographic versus perspective. So I'm going to select all these objects. And I'm going to maximize this window with Alt W. For now, you don't really have to do this. I just want you to sort of watch for a second. So I'm going to hit F, and that puts me in the front view. And I'm going to go to my Layers tab, and I'm going to unhide my layer. Okay, so these are a bunch of different cubes. Okay, in the perspective view, you'll notice a thing that is far away is smaller, just like in life. If we're looking at a city block, right? If I'm looking down a city block, the buildings that are further away are going to be significantly smaller, even though if I get close to them, they're actually bigger. This is the way our eyes work. Okay? However, sometimes it's really nice to be able to keep everything the same size visually, no matter how far away it is. And in order to do that, we have an orthographic view. An orthographic view is where perspective doesn't take into account. Okay, so if I have perspective like this, where you can see it, if I did an orthographic view, it looks like this. Now, you should probably look at that and say, oh, that's very weird. That feels very weird. Because even though this cube is the furthest away, it still looks big. Right? It makes the whole thing just look very strange because you're not used to seeing things this way. So this is called orthographic view. Your front view, your top view, and your left view are all orthographic. Front, top, left. Front, top, left. Front. If you hold Alt and use your middle mouse button and rotate out of a front view, you'll notice almost immediately that it changes up here to orthographic. In order to fix that, all I have to do is hit P, and I get back to my perspective view. Now, if I hold Alt W, you can see in most of these views, I've got a wireframe view, and it says right there. Down here, I've got shaded and edge faces. You can change any of these views whenever you want. You could set it to realistic, and then you'll have some shadows automatically fill in. Okay. You'll also notice that if you don't, it still looks very strange because they're orthographic to begin with. You can set them to perspective, but then you might as well work in your perspective view. And this is the crux of the entire system. The better you get at 3D modeling, the more, or the less actually, you'll need to rely on multiple viewports. You can get everything done using one viewport maximized and then swapping to different viewports as you need. Left, top, front. And then when you scroll out, you hit P and you have your perspective view. So that's the difference between orthographic and perspective viewports. With that in mind, let's move on to our snowman. Now you'll notice in my perspective view, we've got a grid on the ground. This grid is great. And if it has an edge, then it is in perspective view. If there's no edge, if you're looking at it from the front, there's no edge. I can zoom out and the grid gets bigger and bigger. If I'm looking at it from the top or the left, all the orthographic views, now I'm back in front, all orthographic views have the grid that's very, very far out. If you Alt, middle mouse, and rotate, you get a grid that's very strange because, once again, there's no perspective in action. So you've got to make sure you're in the perspective view. So you hit the key, the P key, to get a manageable grid. So what we're going to do is we're going to make a snowman today. And it's actually pretty easy to make because we're just going to take primitive shapes and stack them on top of each other. The snowman's going to start out as a sphere. Now, we create a sphere, we want to make sure it's going to be a logical size. Now you can go with whatever size you want. Everything I have is set in centimeters. Yours is probably just generic units, and that's fine. For now, I created this, and mine is light blue, although yours could be any color in the rainbow because it automatically gets set to a generic color. Alright? You can adjust that if you want, but you don't really need to because we're going to adjust it and make it white and pretty later, like the fresh new fallen snow. So I created a sphere. I'm going to hit F for front. Now my sphere is not aligned perfectly because when I created it, I was in the perspective view. In order to create it, if you missed, let's do one creation here. Alright, so I made sure I was in my create tab, which is right up here. I made sure I was in my geometry buttons, and I made sure that the pull down menu said standard primitives. There's a whole bunch of other stuff we can create, but for now let's stick with standard primitives. I'm going to create a sphere, so I need to click on the sphere box. Now I can click and drag anywhere I want, and it will create a sphere as big as I drag. So I'm clicking and dragging. I haven't let go of my left mouse button. When I'm ready, I'm going to let go. So let's say there. So my radius was 30 centimeters or 30 units. So yours can be 30, and that's fine. Or it can be a different number. It doesn't really matter. Now from the front view, hit F. I'm going to go to the front view. Now this is a orthographic view. This is where orthographic views really start to shine. I'm going to select the sphere, which should already be selected. Now I'm going to hit W. If you select W, you should be able to move your sphere up and down. Well, I want my sphere to be at 0, 0, 0. I want it to be right in the center of my entire grid. If I hit P for perspective, I want this thing to sit perfectly in the center. In order to do that, I'm going to move it to do that, okay? Except instead of moving up here, I'm going to come all the way down here to these little type in transforms. On each one, you can highlight the number and press 0 and then hit enter, or you can move the spinner to try and get it to 0. That's hard. Or you can just right click the spinner and it'll automatically set it to 0. So I right click every single one of these little arrows next to the X, Y, and Z down here. X, Y, Z. So now all of my sphere's center point, its pivot point, is set to 0, 0, 0. From the front view, I have this sphere. From the top, I have this sphere. Now from the front again, left looks the same as the front, really. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to move this up so that my snowman is going to be sitting at the line here, maybe sinking in a little bit because snow sinks in. Now I'm going to hold shift, and then I'm going to drag up another sphere. Just by shift and drag, by holding shift and then moving the original sphere, I can create a whole new sphere. Alright, it's going to say, hey, you want to create this? I'm going to say yes. I'm going to create a copy of this, and I'm only going to create one. So click OK. Now snowmen are usually not the same size. They get smaller as they go up. So let's go ahead and hit the E key. I'm sorry, R key. R up here for select and uniform scale. Now the R key is the only one that's tricky, because if you're not careful, if you hit R over and over again, you get 3 different types of R. Select uniform scale, select non-uniform scale, and select and squash. Select and squash is the only one that's scary, and it looks like this, because you'll be rescaling something thinking it's fine, but it's not. It ends up being really bad. So I right click to cancel that. I'm going to go here, click here, and I'm going to shrink this whole sphere down so it's a little smaller than the one below it. This is our snowman's chest, or snow lady. This is their chest, and I can sink that in a little bit. Now those vertices, that geometry, if I hit front, that's crashing into each other, and we don't really care. That's okay for today. Let's do it again. Hold shift, drag it up again, let go. We're going to make a copy again. We'll call it sphere 3. We could actually highlight here and call it head if we wanted. Click OK. Now hit R for resize. Make sure you have the correct type of resize. You can have select in uniform or select in non-uniform. Either one works, because when we grab the widget, we grab it from the center triangle. That means we're resizing it from all directions at the same time. And then you can move it up to make sure it's good. So there's our body of our snowman. Now we need to create another two spheres for the eyes. This time we're actually going to rotate them a little bit too. So I'm going to click sphere. Now I'm in the hit F for front. Make sure you're in the front view. It should say up here front. I'm just going to click, not actually in his face right now. I'm going to click on the left side or right side, doesn't matter. I'm going to click and drag out my sphere. Now I want it about the right size for the eyeball. So the eyeball itself is going to be pretty circular, but I don't need it to be that circular because we're talking about a small eyeball on a snowman. Now over here, when you create an object, you have something called parameters. Every shape has different parameters, and you'll learn all about them later. But for now, under segments, which is over here, I'm going to change my segments to 16. Okay? You'll notice that makes my sphere a lot less spherical and a lot more blocky. If I knock it down to 8, it gets even worse. Right? I can go all the way down to 3. But not really, because it won't let me go to 3 because it needs at least 4. So I'm going to leave it at 16. Alright, hit the front view. And I'm going to hit W so I can move it. Now if I move it over here, it disappears. That doesn't make sense. Let's go ahead and look at this from the top. You see, whenever we create an object, it's automatically created on the plane in an orthographic view. So that means this was created along this plane because we're looking at it from the front. So from the top, it's created along the center line, which is great, except we want this to be more here. So from I'm going to get it roughly in the right spot. I'm going to hit front, and I'm going to hit P for perspective. Zoom out a little bit with the middle mouse button. A little bit, and then hold Alt and hold the middle mouse button to rotate around. That's kind of a buggy-eyed snowman, so we're going to rotate this sphere a little bit by hitting the E key. Now if you rotate in the center here, it'll go in whatever direction you want. Most of the time you're going to want to constrain this, which means have it so it only moves along one thing, one axis. So we're going to constrain it to one axis. I'm going to take this and rotate it over by 30 degrees or 35 degrees. Now you notice I'm getting only 5-degree increments. If you're not getting only 5 degrees, you can hit the A key and then you can get whatever you want. But I'm going to hit A to make sure my angle snap is on. I'm going to change it to 35 degrees. Now on the front view, I want to create another eyeball, and I want it to be perfectly offset along the center. Now we built the snowman on the center, so if we want to make a copy of it on the other side, all we need to do is come up here to the mirror button. Click mirror. Alright. We're going to mirror along the x-axis. We're going to create a copy, and we can roll the offset if we want to change where it is. Alright. Except I do want that, but I don't want this to change. So I'm going to click OK. And now I'm going to just change the position of it by hitting W and moving it over. Alright, hit E and we can rotate this 60, probably 70 degrees. There. That's pretty nice. There's our eyeballs. Great. Now, from the front view again, hit F for front. We've got eyeballs. We're going to hit Q. If we hit Q, we can select things. So I'm going to select both eyeballs by clicking on one eyeball, then holding Control and clicking the other. Now I can hit W, move it up, so it's more about where his eyes should be. If you want to rotate it again, you can hit E, world, screen, there. I can rotate it a little bit like that if I want. Cool. There's my eyeballs. Next, let's create our nose. Our nose is going to be a caret, and a caret is basically a cone. So hit F for front. We're going to create, whenever we create a cone, it is created so the point is towards us. So I'm going to grab a cone, click and drag out, let go. Now I can move it one way or the other. I guess I want to move it, probably move it down. Click again, and then click again. Now, if your cone was created the wrong direction like mine was, we're going to have to fix that. So hit T for top, E for rotate, and then make sure our angle snap is on by hitting A until this little magnet with the angle is blue. And let's just rotate it 90 degrees. Boom. There we go. Great. Now we can hit W and move this so it's where it should be. Now I want this to be directly in line with this center line grid, which is the x-axis, okay? Because this is the x-axis coming through here. So I want the x-axis to be at 0. So I can come down here and right-click on that button. Hit front, and I'm going to move this down so it's in the nose place from the left. So I've got a nose. If you want to resize it, you can resize it like this. Make it bigger if you want. Whatever you want. That looks pretty good. It's a good start. Notice I'm using the middle mouse button to move around. I hold Alt and middle mouse button to rotate. Now you can see the way the grid's flipping out. I'm not in perspective. I'm in an orthographic view. If I hit P, the snowman will look a lot better. Great. Now let's make his hat. From the top, we're going to make a hat. So the hat is going to be a cylinder. Alright, I'll make the brim of his hat first. Alright, I clicked and held and dragged out the size I wanted. And then if you push up and down, you can resize the actual height of the cylinder. It's hard to see, but press up a little bit and click on it. From the front view, you can see that it gets created on the floor. Now yours probably has 5 height segments, which looks like this. We're not going to need all those height segments, so you can actually, before you move it, hit W and move it, you can actually adjust this stuff over here. So I want to right click the height segment, so I've just got one, and I'm going to change the size to 16. Yay! And then I'm going to change I'm going to hit front, F for front, hit W. I'm going to move this up. Now what I'm really looking for here is I'm looking for the brim of a top hat. I'm going to align this to the center again. From the left, I'm going to align it to Y. There we go. So that's directly above his head. You can make whatever hat you want, but I'm going to hit R, and I'm going to shrink this down so it's going to be the top, just the top, or just the rim of his top hat. Now if I hit W, I can actually sink it down on his head a little bit. But we're not done. We need to make another piece of his top hat, the actual, stovepipe part. So I'm going to hold Shift again, drag it up like this, create a copy. A copy is a unique object. An instance, if I adjust anything on this, it'll automatically adjust that. A reference is like an instance, but it only works one way. So for now, I'm going to look at this, hold Alt, rotate up, hit R, and I'm going to shrink this in on the center. So from the front now, I've got that part. I can resize it, hit W, set it like that. So now I've got a sweet little hat. Now, I've actually got 2 different pieces of geometry, but I want them to work together. As a matter of fact, I'd really like it if this part followed whatever that did. So we're going to link this to that. Linking is up here. Select the link. It looks like a little chain. Click on that. Click on the top part of the hat. Click on the brim. Now, if I hit Q, select the brim, hit W and move it, the top part goes with it. If I just try and move the top, it does not move the bottom. This is called a parent and child relationship. Wherever the parent goes, the child has wherever the parent goes, the child has to go. but wherever the child goes, it can go on its own. However, if I go back and move the parent, it will move with it. I'm going to undo that. So now, from the left view, I'm going to look at my top hat, hit E. I want to make sure I'm just moving my rim there, brim of my hat. I'm going to rotate it back a little bit. I'm going to hit W. I want to move it so it's sitting right on his head. Like that. Alright. We're almost done. We just need to make a waving hand. So, from the top, we're going to create a cylinder. Just like we did a second ago. Except this time we're going to click it. It's going to be thin. And we'll push up. Click again. Hit left. Hit front. And now we've got a cylinder. We can resize the cylinder. We can resize the radius. Resize the height. And hit W. Move it over here. And then hit E. Rotate it over like that. So I want my little snowman to be waving here. So I'm going to put that like that. And hit W to move it up like this. Great. Now I'm going to hold Shift. And drag that up here, because this is going to be his fingers. Right? I'll call it finger. Finger 1. This is right hand, so I'll say right. Finger 1. Okay, cool. Now I'm going to resize it, because I don't want it that big. Shrink that down to finger length. Hit E. I'm going to rotate it a little bit. Hit W and set it out like that. Now, up until now, we've basically only used Shift when we were moving things with the W key, but you can do the same thing with R, R and E, but E is where we use it a lot. So if I hold Shift as I move this, it's going to say, hey, you want to make a copy, right? Yes, I do. But I want to make not just one, I want to make 3 more, because I've already got 1 finger. So I need 1, 2, 3 more fingers. So I'm going to click 3 here and click OK. And it automatically rotates each one the same amount. Now I can hit W, grab just this one, hold Shift, and drag it down like that for a thumb. Click OK. Now if you want to get crazy, or if not, you can rotate this a little bit, move it down like that a little bit. Move that one a little bit. There. So there, now we've got a hand-ish. You can grab multiple pieces and rotate them if you want, but from the front, sometimes that can be a little dubious. There, it's good enough. Hit front. Now we're going to do the same thing we did here with the hat. So we want all of these to be children of the arm. So we're going to hold Control and click each one of these fingers. Just hold Control, click, 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 click. I want to use the chain link to select them, drag to the arm here. And now if I hit W, select the arm and move it, all the fingers move with it. This is great because now I can hold Shift. Oops, I grabbed the wrong piece. Cancel. Grab the arm. All of these pieces. And I'm actually going to make a copy of this using something called the mirror tool, which is up here under where it says Max Script. It looks like kind of a number 1 and a number 7 looking at each other. Click that. It's going to create another copy of the object. Click OK. Now, I should just be able to take this and move it over. And that's pretty good. I also don't want to just move it over because I don't want him to be sticking his hands up in the air like he's saying don't shoot. I want him to be moving. So, or not moving, but I want him to put one hand down so it looks like he's waving with his other. So in order to do that, I hit E for rotate. Alright. I'm going to rotate his arm. along, but I want it to rotate on a local axis so that it moves based on where his arm is. So we can actually come up here, this pull down menu, and select local. When I click on it, you'll notice the shape changes. That means I can move this down like that and rotate it like that, and maybe back a little bit like that. From the front view, I can hit W and move it out like this. Rotate a little bit like that. Move it out like that. Maybe a little more rotation. There. There. Now it looks like he's waving. Hello. Great. We're done modeling. That's exciting. Now what we get to do is do some painting, do some coloring. So I'm going to hit P for perspective. I'm going to rotate a little bit so we can see all the pieces. All the pieces. In order to create materials, we're going to hit the M key for materials. You'll notice I have an extra one here, but you can delete that or you're not going to have it, so it doesn't matter. I'm going to take that. Whoops. I'm going to delete it. Yes. And go up. I'll delete that one. Yes. Okay, cool. So what we need is our different colors. We definitely need a white. So you can double click on this and see it up close. But to actually change it, we need to come down here to where it says diffuse. If you click on that and then change the color to whatever you want, I'm going to drag mine all the way down to white. Click OK. Now you can actually just drag this onto whatever pieces you want to be white, which for me is just the 3 spheres. Let's do the next one, black. So I'm going to click on this. Under diffuse, I'm going to change it to black. Maybe a gray. Like the hat. The hat is a beat up hat, so I'm going to click OK. And I'm going to drag this onto all the pieces that I want to be black. There and there. The next thing, we could do orange. Click diffuse again. Find a nice orange color that you like. Nice carroty orange. Drag that over, let it go on his nose. And then finally, I'm going to use sticks for arms, which is like in this reddish, low red area. Bring that up, maybe darken it up a little bit like that. That's good enough. And drag it onto there. Now you're going to have to drag it onto each one of these pieces. Like that, that. Or, if you wanted to, you could select this. You could just click them all first and select them. And then, since this is highlighted, you can put assign material to selection. There you go. Our snowman's done. That's exciting. I made sure I'm in perspective mode. Now I'm going to render him out so you can take him home. If you hit Shift F, you can see what's called the render safe mode. Now when you render it, this is what's going to render. We want to make sure that he's taking up as much space as he can, and we want to make sure he's got a nice view. If we look at him from the front, it's okay, but it's better to have a little bit of an angle and be in perspective. So I'm going to hit P for perspective, make sure I'm in perspective mode, and then I'm going to try and make him as big as I can inside this yellow box. If you use your mouse wheel to zoom in and he gets too tight, you can actually come down here. There's a little magnifying glass. If you click on that, you can drag in and out and move him just a little bit at a time. Great. That's about perfect. He's ready for the winter. To render it, we press the key F9, or we press this button up here. We hit render. There we go. Now, if you want to add a scarf, if you want to, well, let's go ahead and save that because we're running longer than I initially figured. We're going to render this out. Okay. Now I'm going to hit the save image, and I'm going to save this as Snowman _TN for thumbnail. Format, you should probably pick a PNG. And make sure you save it onto your desktop. So I'm going to save this on my desktop. Just go all the way up to the top and save it. Hit save. All right. Now your configuration might be set at 48-bit. Make sure it's set to 24-bit because 48-bit is really big for no reason. And then click OK. there you've got your image. One more thing that I forgot to do that I intended to do was to create a shape here that I can use to create a scarf. So that would be a torus. I can click that, create a torus like this, top view, hit W, move it around, zoom in, scale it, front, W, move it up, move it out, R, rescale. There. Got a little scarf looking thing going on like that. I'm going to use a color here. My material, we can actually name this stuff too. Scarf, not that it matters. Diffuse color, I'm going to make it red because that seems festive. Oh, I had the wrong one. Okay, drag that on, scarf. Now I want to create a cube or a box. From the front, I want to create a box about that big, like that. Top view, hit W, I'll move it over like this, front. You can rotate it just a little bit like that. I'll rotate a little more like that. Once again, our rotation is still set to local. However, our positional movement is set to world. So I still have some freedom there. What I'm trying to do is get it so it looks like that's his scarf that's sort of hanging off. You rotate a little bit like that. There. A little bit like that. Set it in. There. If I change the color on that, like that, there we go. Yeah, it looks pretty good. Let's render it again. Perspective view. Zoom out. Use my magnifying glass down here to zoom in. Alright, there you go. Let's render it. There we go. We can overwrite our old one. Save the image. Find my old one. Snowman, TN, save. Since I'm overwriting, I don't have to choose a format, but if I wanted to, I could go back and do that again. Click it, click a save. Hey, are you sure you want to overwrite it? Yes, I am. 24-bit, click OK. Great. Done. There's our snowman. Now you should be able to go to your desktop. Where's my snowman? There he is. Double click, and there he is. You've got a snowman. You take home and say, look, we're ready for winter. There's a whole bunch of other stuff you can still do with this, right? We can extend it. We can make it better. 5. Let's see. There's our snowman. You can add some buttons to it if you want. You can give him more detailed arms and hands. You give him some smiles made of coal, maybe out of corncob pipe. Or you could go totally crazy and make something different. If you've got time. It takes a little time to do this, but really it's all about experimenting and messing around with this stuff. Okay? So use all your time. Try and make it as cool as you can. That's really the best way you're going to learn this stuff is by doing it and doing it over and over. Now, this is some of the things we went through today. We talked about front viewports. We talked about all sorts of viewports, jumping around between them from front to left to top. We talked about maximizing them. We talked about moving around in the viewport, like panning, rotating, zooming, and turning the grid off, on and off. We talked about our different tools. Q is select, W is select and move, E is select and rotate, R is select and scale. We added to the selection using control. We can use Alt, although I don't think we did that today. But the Alt key will actually deselect things from your selection if you've got like a bunch of different pieces. S, we didn't talk about snapping. We did talk about angle snapping with the A key. And then Shift plus using a tool is how we create copies. And then today we also talked about using the material editor window to create colors and drag them on there. And we used F9 or the key to render active viewports. Right? Great. Well, I hope you had a good time making your snowman. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time when we will work on our next project. All right? Until then, enjoy. Have a good time. Take care.